So I've had a few audio issues with my videos recently, so we hopefully have resolved that. And also I'm working on a few projects at the moment, and I'm either waiting on parts or they're being troublesome. So I need to do something fairly quick, fairly easy, just to get back into the modding mindset while I'm waiting either for things to turn up or for the solutions to come to me. So we're going to try and do something a little quick, a little dirty, and a little silly, just to get my modding mind back into shape, if you want to call it that. So now I've got an X shot kickback. I like, or knockback, whatever you want to call it. I like these, they're very tactile. That whole thing is very, very nice. I mean, the grip's a bit small, but your little finger doesn't do anything, but it's a nice little pistol. It has some mod potential. I've modded one and I've got about 90 FPS out of it, which isn't much better than it comes. I think it hits about 70 as is. There are a few issues with the internals, and I want to keep this one stock, so chuck that one over there and we'll work on this one. This one still has stock internals, but obviously I painted the shell for one of my flags, so I want to do something to this. So let's get it open. Alright, so the first problem we run into is that there is a clip in there on both sides holding the slide in place. Theoretically, as long as you're careful, you can force it, but there it is, hooks into that section there. That's on both sides, and then you also need to be aware when taking it apart of that spring, and that is the recoil mechanism right there, so you need to be careful you don't lose any of that when you're taking it apart. Again, ice cream pot or something to keep the parts in. Because it's nice to keep track of these things, there are two size screws in this one. The ones in the slide and the bulk of the body are the longer one, and then you have two short ones, one in that one there, and then one in, where's my finger gone, that one right there. Okay, those are the only two short screws in it. All the others are the longer ones. It's just useful to keep track of that, I find, because you don't want to put a long screw in a short screw post because it'll just come out the other side. So that's just a useful little thing to keep track of. One thing to be wary of when taking these apart, obviously you've got the slide off now, you've unscrewed it all. There are a lot of springs and little mechanisms for the recoil, so just be wary when taking it apart. Things may go sprying, so just be careful, keep track of where everything is. They are a bit of a pig sometimes. Right, so this is what the internals look like. As I say, you've got a spring there and a spring there. That one especially likes to wander off. Plunger tube, rod, etc, etc. The plunger assembly literally just lifts out. Again, be wary because that spring there likes to go spring, and that one does as well. And all this here is part of the recoil mechanism. So again, just be careful where that is. Now, one problem with doing a spring upgrade, let's just take the plunger out real quick. One problem with doing a spring upgrade is that there really isn't much room in there, and the walls there and there, they like to crack. I've had this one come off completely, this one. So it is only thin plastic. What I'm thinking of doing with this one, shorten the plunger tube ever so slightly and then reinforce that with a little bit of plastic. It shouldn't make much difference, because when you see where the catch sits, the plunger actually doesn't come all the way down. It literally sits around about here-ish when you line the catch up, so you can shave a millimetre or two off this just to be able to reinforce the shell. So I'm planning on doing that in order to allow a spring upgrade, because I have upgraded a spring on one of these previously, and as I say, that side sheared off completely, and that side has got stress cracks in it. So I'm not going to use too thick a piece of plastic, couple of millimeters at most, which just means I need to trim a tiny piece off of this. So there we go. AR removal is very easy. The barrel just pops off and there's your AR. All you need to do is move it out of the way and trim that post off completely, and that will just remove the AR because it's all just held on by that piece. One thing to be wary of is that the plunger head is slightly hollow, so that does mean a bit of dead space, so fill it up with a foam pad or, you know, epoxy it, whatever, just to allow, because otherwise, because it fits over that bit when it collapses. So when you're cutting that off, you don't need the big gap, so you can fill that up. Yep, right, anyway, let's finish stripping it apart. The orange muzzle, if you will, is clipped onto the shell. It's not as bad as some of the clips on Nerf blasters. You can, or I managed to pop it off with my nail, but you can always just trim it and glue it, or, you know, use a screwdriver or whatever. But that's something to be aware of, especially if you want to paint the main body. So yep. Right, so I've got a piece of pipe. I need to make that fit in there. I think the idea would be leave a little section of that and then just glue it onto the end of that, so that it has a permanent point of contact rather than just gluing it onto the plunger tube. So at least we know this section fits. So I can just bolt this on the end, well, glue this, cut this off right about here, and then just overlap that slightly, because it does fit quite nicely. Need to file it out. In case you hadn't guessed what I'm doing, yeah, I seem to have a lot of ultra darts and a lot of pipe left over from when I did the Maverick, so why not? We're going to need to Dremel or file that section out, just to make it fit, because at the moment it just sits on the top and it's not great. So we'll do that, and then we'll worry about getting that in there, and then reinforce this section, bring upgrade. Yeah, see what we can do. Okay, so there is a little reinforcing tab on there. I don't want to disturb that, so I've literally left a couple of millimeter in there, and now that should, and in the way, fit over that tab. Again, I do need to Dremel this section or file it or whatever, just to get this bit of pipe to fit, because it is a little tight, but it will slot over that tab now, so it will literally, that will just hold the plunger in place, but I just need to make this pipe fit the rest of the shell. So yeah, that's next. Alright, so it took a bit of effort, a fair bit of dremeling, especially on that section, but that now fits in quite nicely and lines up. It's a bit squishy, but the screws will pull it together. I'm going to square this off a little bit and then paint all of that section orange, just to match it all up rather than having two different shades of orange. So that'll get painted. Now I need to shorten the plunger tube slightly, reinforce this section, find a spring, make that fit the ultra darts, which needs a little bit of filing inside, and then paint. So still a bit to do. That's just the barrel. Working on the spring. So while the barrel's gluing, we're going to look at reinforcing the spring catch area, and that basically means cutting the section off this end, and then I've got some, I don't know, 2 or 3 mil foam board, Foamex, plastic, whatever, and I'm going to glue it in down there and down there, just to reinforce the 2 weakest points. I'm literally just going to take the width of that, measure it on there, and then cut the bottom off that. As I say, I mean, the plunger finishes about there, so we've got plenty of room to work with, but I don't want to take too much out because I don't want it moving around too much. So we'll cut this, cut that, glue it, job's good. Alright, so what I did, I've cut the end of the plunger tube down, so that now fits and leaves a little bit of a gap. This force it in the gap, and then just trace like that, so I know that that fits. Trace where these ridges are to allow for the plunger rod rather. Now I just need to cut this out, so file it down a bit and make sure it still fits, and then make sure the plunger rod still fits, and then glue it in place. Let's get on with that. Added the spacers. Plunger tube still fits, still snug, and then also the plunger rod fits nicely between them. It gives us a nice little bit of reinforcement just on these 2 weak points, so when I do a spring upgrade it shouldn't snap immediately, so that's good. Only thing left now is fill that gap, place the spring, bolt it all together and try it. So yeah, we're getting there. Right, if you've seen some of my earlier videos, I like party cannon springs. The party cannons are actually not great, but the springs, having done a couple of these and having then bought replacement springs for the blasters, I know that they work out at about 6 kilos. They're good for a decent cheap power boost. You just need to take the cannon apart, get the spring out, and then cut it to fit, round the ends off, things of that nature. But they do work out at about a 6 kilo weight, so that's not a bad little boost, especially for something this small. So we'll get that spring fitted, we'll fill the dead space with some padding, and then we'll bolt it together and try it. Happy days. Okay, so I failed to video the paintwork and the reassembly, but it's done. The logo's crooked. The problem is once you glue these things, they don't like coming apart again. The paintwork's a bit ropey, but it works. So now we'll do chrono test and distance test. So yeah, we'll get that sorted. Right, I'm not quite sure why, but when I was building the thing, I was testing it and it was hitting 102. But rather disappointingly, now I've put it all back together, I've lost about 5 FPS. So whether it's the weight of this slide carriage, I'm not quite sure. But just to show that that wasn't a fluke, do it again. See, that's slightly lower. I think I had the angle on. The barrel fit is very awkward. And then one more. See, so 95-ish FPS. Curious as to how I lost 5 or 6, but I'll take it. They reckon that a good sort of, especially for these darts, anywhere sort of 100-ish is ideal for them to go straight. I think it's 100, 110 or something, so we'll go out and give it a whirl. Right, so because obviously Ultra is supposed to be accurate, I've got a head on a stick to aim at against the backdrop of the shed. Obviously important that you wear safety glasses when nerfing at all times. So this will be approximately 35, 36-ish feet from where I fire. So we'll see how many times I hit him out of however many I shoot at him. I've got to give him a name at some point. Right, so obviously as we are aware, the shed's roughly 35 feet away from where I'm standing. Got the head on a stick. So somebody give me a name for him. Got the Ultra Kickback. Start with 6 shots, see how we get on. Again, they reckon that over 100 FPS to about 110 FPS is good for accuracy. We're running slightly lower. I'm running at about 95, so see if we can hit him at all. And the tripod's in my way. Fair enough, can't get it in frame, so I'll just move back over there. Alright, so let's see if we can hit him. swing and miss. Oh, that was about a foot wide. Oh, that was low. Oh, headshot. That's 1 out of 4. Might have it dialed in now. No, definitely don't have it dialed in. Last one that I've got on me. Ooh, that was close. You know what? I'm going to gather them up and do them again. On the plus side, at least I got all 6 back that time. Alright, I'm going to do another 6 because this is just silly. Alrighty. Ooh, a couple of inches. Well over his head. There's plenty of noise. I mean, you can hear the noise coming off the shed, so there's plenty of zap to it. Oh, that was just high. I think my barrel angle's slightly off. Nah. So I have to put the fear in them, but I'm not quite making contact. Oh, that would have been a shoulder hit if it was an actual human. So accuracy, to be fair, as I say, I think my barrel's slightly off centre. I haven't really aimed at anything in a long time, so pistol's not my strong point, but yeah, pretty good.